In the dry, shimmering heat of Arizona, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base was a place of serious business. It was home to the A-10 Warthog, a plane that was not pretty, fast, or new. It was a flying tank built around a giant cannon, and the pilots who flew it were a special breed. Captain Eva "Rebel" Rostova fit the plane more than the uniform. She was quiet, small, and her flight suit always looked a little rumpled. She grew up in a small Texas town, learning to fix engines from her father. She did not come from a family of generals. She was not a graduate of the fancy academies. This is why the new commander, Colonel Marcus Thorne, did not like her. Colonel Thorne was a tall man who looked good in a uniform. His office was clean, his boots were shined, and he cared very much about appearances. He believed in politics, in shaking the right hands, in looking the part. One hot Tuesday, he was inspecting the flight line. He stopped in front of Eva, who was checking the turbine blades on her A-10. He looked her up and down. His voice was loud enough for the maintenance crew to hear. "Captain," he said, his voice flat, "your aircraft looks almost as untidy as your uniform. I expect my pilots to look like officers, not mechanics. Try to keep up with the men." Eva's jaw tightened. She felt the eyes of her crew chief on her. She did not break eye contact. She just stood straight and said, "Yes, sir." Thorne moved on, but the insult hung in the air. The other pilots, mostly men who played golf with the colonel, stayed away from her. She was an outsider. That evening, Eva walked to the boneyard. It was a giant field where old, retired military planes were kept. Thousands of them, silent in the setting sun. She walked past old bombers and fighters. They were seen as old, outdated, and useless. She put her hand on the cold metal wing of a retired Warthog. "I know how you feel," she whispered. She felt a kinship with these old warriors. They were judged by people who had never seen what they could really do. They were seen as obsolete, but she knew they were still full of fight. She felt it in her, too. A week later, the entire unit got the news. They were being deployed. A conflict was heating up in a mountain range across the world. Colonel Thorne would be in command. Eva packed her bags. She knew this would be the hardest test of her life. She was not just fighting an enemy. She was fighting the man who was supposed to be on her side. The airbase was not in Arizona anymore. It was a dusty, cold, and tense place surrounded by tall, jagged mountains. The air was thin. The mood was grim. Colonel Thorne stood in front of a large map in the briefing room. Everyone was there. "All right, listen up," Thorne said. "We have a situation. A friendly recon team, call sign Alpha, is trapped on this ridge." He pointed to a red circle on the map. "Their position is compromised. We have a very small window to get them out." The room was silent. That ridge was known as the Hornet's Nest. It was full of hidden anti-aircraft guns. Thorne continued. "The plan is simple. 2 helicopters will go in for the rescue. They need air cover. Captain Jensen," he nodded to a loud, confident pilot who went by Viper, "you will fly high cover. Keep the skies clear." Viper nodded. "You got it, sir." Then Thorne looked at Eva. His eyes were cold. "Captain Rostova," he said, "you will fly low cover. Your job is to fly ahead of the helicopters and make noise. Keep their heads down. Draw their fire. And Rostova, try not to get in the way." It was a slap in the face. A suicide mission disguised as a support role. Drawing fire meant she was the bait. He was putting her in the most dangerous spot, but as a side job, a distraction. Eva just said, "Understood, Colonel." While the other pilots talked and laughed, Eva went to her small room. She did not trust Thorne's plan. It was too simple. It was arrogant. She spent hours looking at the satellite photos of the ridge. She studied every shadow, every goat path, every rocky outcrop. She mapped her own route, one that was low, dangerous, and used the canyons for cover. She knew the terrain better than anyone in that room. Before she left for her plane, she did something unusual. She packed extra medical supplies and survival rations into the pockets of her flight suit. Her crew chief saw her. "Expecting trouble, Captain?" he asked. "Always," Eva said. "Always." She climbed into the cockpit of her A-10. She felt at home. The plane was old, scratched, and smelled like oil and metal. It was honest. As they took off, the sun was setting. The radios crackled. Ava flew her warthog low, disappearing into the dark canyons. Colonel Thorne watched her green dot on his command screen. He did not look worried. He looked annoyed. 30 minutes later, the radios screamed to life. It was not the enemy. It was the rescue team. Mayday, mayday! We are hit! We are hit! Engine 1 is on fire. We are going down! The mission had just begun, and it was already a disaster. Chaos exploded over the radio. I'm hit! I'm hit! It was Viper, the high-cover pilot. My wingman is trailing smoke. We're pulling out! Viper and his partner turned and ran, leaving the rescue mission exposed. Back at the command center, Colonel Thorne watched his screen turn red. His perfect plan was falling apart. He grabbed his microphone. His voice was cold and sharp. All assets, all assets. This mission is a failure. I am scrubbing the operation. Withdraw immediately. Return to base. He was cutting them loose. He was abandoning the rescue helicopters and the trapped Alpha team on the ground. Eva was orbiting the ridge. She was hidden in a dark canyon, and she could see it all. She saw the first helicopter burning on the mountainside, and she saw the second helicopter landed hard, with the recon team scrambling to set up a defense. They were pinned down. Enemy trucks were already moving up the mountain. They had minutes, maybe less. Thorne's voice came into her helmet. Captain Rostova, you are in a high-threat area. That is a direct order. Acknowledge and return to base. We are listing you as returning. Eva looked at her fuel gauge. She had enough to get home. She looked at the men on the ground, tiny figures in the dark, fighting for their lives. She thought about Thorne, safe in his command center. She thought about his smug, dismissive face. He was ordering her to run. He was ordering her to be a coward. She clicked her microphone. Negative, Colonel. I'm engaging. Captain, I will have you court-martialed. You acknowledge my order. Ava took her hand off the radio switch. She turned her main comms off, cutting Thorne's voice out of her head. She switched to the emergency channel for the ground team. Her voice was calm. Alpha team, this is Hog 1. I am on station. Tell me where you need me. A desperate voice came back. They're everywhere. We're being overrun. Not for long, Eva said. She pointed the nose of her warthog down and flew straight into the valley. She flew straight at the anti-aircraft guns. The last thing Colonel Thorne heard from the mountain was a sound he would never forget. The sound of Eva's A-10 cannon. Bert! Then silence. Her green dot on his screen went black. Back at the airbase, the silence was heavy. Colonel Thorne stood in front of his command staff. His face was a mask of false sadness. We lost a brave pilot today, he said, his voice quiet. Captain Rostova, despite a direct order to withdraw, chose to engage the enemy alone. It was a reckless act, a tragic end to a difficult mission. He was already writing the story. He was blaming her. The ground team, Alpha, and the helicopter crews are also lost. The mission was a complete failure. Because an officer refused to follow orders, he was making her the scapegoat. He was covering his own bad plan. He officially listed her as killed in action and lost in combat. He was closing the book on Eva Rostova. She was officially declared lost, but Eva was not dead. Her A-10 was a ruin. She had crash-landed it, belly down, in a dry riverbed. The plane was torn to pieces. The engines were silent. The wings were bent, but the cockpit, a titanium bathtub built for survival, was in one piece. She was alive. Bruised, a broken rib, but alive. She crawled out of the wreckage, and she was not alone. The recon team, Alpha, and the surviving helicopter crew had seen her crash. They had fought their way to her. They were all ghosts now. The Air Force thought they were dead. They had no support. No rescue was coming. One of the soldiers was a young sergeant. He was the one who had heard Thorne insult Eva back in Arizona. He looked at her, then at the burning enemy trucks she had destroyed before she crashed. Captain, he said, his voice full of awe. You came for us. We're not done yet, Sergeant, Eva said, wincing as she grabbed her rifle. We have to walk out. She looked at the wounded. One of the helicopter pilots had a bad leg. We don't leave anyone behind, Eva said. For days, they walked. They moved at night. They hid in caves. Eva, despite her broken rib, helped carry the wounded pilot. She was no longer just a pilot. She was their leader, Back at the base, Colonel Thorne was being praised. He had, the report said, made the tough call to cut his losses and save his other assets. He was already being recommended for a promotion. On the 5th day, hiding in a cave, the little group was out of food. They were low on water, and they heard a noise. It was the rumble of engines. Many of them, an enemy patrol. They were cornered. The sound of the engines got louder. The trapped soldiers looked at Ava. They were exhausted, hungry, and losing hope. "They have us," the sergeant whispered. "There's nowhere to run." Eva looked out from the cave. The enemy patrol was not just a few trucks. It was a long convoy. They were searching for something. "They were searching for them. They're not just a patrol," Eva said. "They're hunters." She knew they could not win a direct fight. "And they could not run. We have to go back," she said. The men looked at her, confused. "Back where, Captain?" "Back to my plane," Eva said. It was an insane idea. The crash site was 5 miles back in the open, but it was their only chance. They waited for the sun to go down. They moved like shadows, using the skills of the recon team and the grit of the pilot. As they walked, the young sergeant moved up beside Ava. They were helping the wounded man. "Moving slowly, Captain," the sergeant said, his voice low. "I was there, at Davis-Monthan. I heard what the colonel said to you." Eva kept walking. "It doesn't matter, Sergeant." "It does," he said. "He called you a mechanic. He said you couldn't keep up." The sergeant shook his head. "He was wrong. We were all listening on the radio. He ordered you to run." "Why didn't you?" Ava stopped for a moment. She looked at the wounded men she was helping to save. "He could order me to run," Eva said. "He could declare me lost. He can write whatever he wants in his report, but he can't make me quit." They kept moving. When they got to the crash site, it was just as they had left it, a broken metal corpse. The enemy convoy was still far behind them, searching the wrong valley. "What now, Captain?" the sergeant asked. "We can't fly it." "We don't need to fly it," Eva said. She climbed back into the dark cockpit. It felt like a tomb. She looked at the control panel. It was dead. "The plane is gone, Captain," one of the recon soldiers said. "He was an engineer." "The plane is dead," Eva agreed. "But maybe the Warthog isn't." She told them what to do. They worked fast. They were a team of ghosts working on a ghost plane. They stripped wires. They rerouted power from the emergency batteries. They checked the cannon's ammo feed. The engineer looked at her. "Captain, what are you trying to do?" "I'm trying to turn on the auxiliary power unit," she said. "If we can get the APU running, we can power the cannon." It was a long shot. They worked for an hour. Then a low whine started. A light flickered on the dashboard. The A-10 was not flying, but it was awake. Just then, the radio, powered by the last bit of battery, crackled. It was a broadcast from their home base. They heard a voice. It was Colonel Thorne. He was speaking at a memorial service. "For them, we honor their sacrifice," Thorne's voice said. "Especially Captain Rostova, who in her final reckless moments showed us the cost of disobedience." Eva listened to the man who left her for dead giving her eulogy. At that same moment, the sergeant yelled from outside. "They found us! The convoy! They're here!" Headlights flooded the valley. The enemy convoy had arrived. They were surrounding the wreck. The enemy trucks and armored vehicles formed a circle around the crashed A-10. They stopped, their headlights pinning the wreck in a bright, cold light. Soldiers jumped out, laughing. They saw a broken plane. They saw a prize. The Alpha team took cover behind the landing gear and the torn-off wings. They were badly outnumbered. "This is it, Captain," the sergeant yelled, chambering a round in his rifle. Eva was in the cockpit. She looked at the power gauge. The APU was running. The light for the Ju-8 cannon was green. It had ammunition. The plane could not fly, but it could still fight. She was not a pilot anymore. She was a gunner. "In a fortress! Get your heads down!" she yelled to the team. The enemy soldiers started walking toward the plane, casual, arrogant. They thought the fight was over. Eva put her thumb on the trigger. Her voice was steady. "You are not taking us today." She pressed the button. Bert! The sound of the A-10's cannon ripped the night apart. It was a terrifying, deafening roar. In 3 seconds, the giant gun fired 200 armor-piercing shells. The first truck exploded. The second one was shredded into metal ribbons. The enemy soldiers stopped laughing. They screamed. They ran for cover. Eva did not stop. She was calm. She was focused. She was the A-10. She swung the cannon and fired again. Bert! Another truck gone. The enemy was in a panic. They were trying to fire back, but their bullets just bounced off the A-10's titanium armor. The titanium bathtub that was built to protect the pilot was now protecting all of them. The Warthog, torn apart and broken, was Defiant. In less than a minute, the entire convoy was destroyed. The fight was over. Silence fell over the valley again, broken only by the sound of fires. The recon team stood up, stunned. They were all alive. Eva's hands were shaking, but her voice was strong. The crash had damaged the long-range radio, but the APU was powering it now. She grabbed the hand mic. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," she said into the radio. "This is Hog 1. This is Captain Eva Rostova." She gave her coordinates. "I am at my crash site with Alpha Team and the survivors of the rescue crew. We are alive. We have neutralized the enemy. We require immediate extraction." Back at the base, Colonel Thorne was in the middle of his memorial speech. The radio operator's eyes went wide. He turned up the volume. Eva's voice filled the command center. Thorne's face went white. He dropped his microphone. He looked at the radio as if he had just seen a ghost. The command center was silent. Everyone was frozen, staring at the radio. Colonel Thorne was the first to move. He looked pale, angry. He grabbed the microphone from the operator. "Unidentified station," Thorne barked, his voice shaking. "You're using a lost call sign. Identify yourself immediately. Captain Rostova is dead. I repeat, Captain Rostova is dead." The radio hissed for a long moment. Then, Eva's voice came back, clear and cold. It was heard by everyone in the room. "Not yet, Colonel." The room exploded. People were shouting. The rescue mission was back on. 2 Black Hawk helicopters were scrambled immediately. Thorne was furious. He was trapped. He could not stop the rescue. His lie was falling apart. "Find them," he ordered, his voice a low growl. "Bring them back." 2 hours later, the rescue helicopters flew into the dark valley. The pilots could not believe what they were seeing. The entire enemy convoy was wiped out, and in the middle of the wreckage, like a sleeping dragon, sat the A-10. It was shot to pieces, riddled with holes, one wing missing, and standing on the other wing, holding rifles, were the lost soldiers of Alpha Team. As the helicopters landed, the young sergeant helped Eva out of the cockpit. She was covered in dirt and hydraulic fluid. She was holding her side where the rib was broken. But she was walking. The rescue team ran to them. We thought you were all gone," the flight medic said, his voice choked with emotion. "We held on," Eva said simply. The flight back was quiet. Eva sat by the door, watching the dark mountains pass by. She had done it. She had saved her team. But she knew the fight was not over. When they landed back at the base, it was just before dawn. It was not a hero's welcome. A silent crowd had gathered. And at the front, standing beside 2 armed military police, was Colonel Thorne. His face was hard as stone. He had recovered. He had a new plan. As Eva stepped off the helicopter, Thorne walked right up to her. The sergeant and the Alpha Team gathered behind her. "Captain Eva Rostova," Thorne said, his voice loud for everyone to hear. "You are a disgrace to this uniform. You directly disobeyed a lawful order. You endangered this entire command." He nodded to the MPs. "You are under arrest." The military police took a step forward, but the young sergeant took a step first. He stood between Eva and the MPs. "No, sir," the sergeant said. Thorne's eyes narrowed. "Get out of the way, Sergeant. That is an order." "I can't do that, sir," the sergeant said. His voice was not loud, but it was strong. The entire Alpha Team stepped forward with him. They were armed. They were exhausted. And they were angry. They formed a wall in front of Eva. "What is the meaning of this?" Thorne demanded. "The meaning, sir," the sergeant said, "is that we have the logs." "What logs?" Thorne snapped. "Our helmet cams, sir." They were recording. The whole time. The sergeant looked past Thorne at the other pilots and crew who were watching. "We have the audio of Colonel Thorne ordering a full retreat before the first helicopter was even hit. We have the audio of him abandoning us." A wave of shock went through the crowd. The sergeant continued. His after-action report is a lie. He said Captain Rostova was reckless. The truth is he was a coward. He was saving his career. He then looked at Eva. The only reason we are alive, the only reason, is because Captain Rostova refused to leave us behind. She saved us. Then she led us. Then she fought for us from a dead plane. Thorne was speechless. His face was red. He had no words. She is not a disgrace, sir, the sergeant said, his voice thick with emotion. She is a hero. Just then, a new man stepped out of the crowd. He was in a clean uniform with a general's star on his shoulder. He had flown in on the rescue helicopter. He was from headquarters. Colonel Thorne, the general said, his voice like ice. You are relieved of command. These MPs are here for you. The MPs, looking stunned, moved past Eva and stood on either side of Thorne. Thorne looked at Eva. His face was a mix of hatred and defeat. Eva just watched him. She did not say a word. She was in her torn, dirty flight suit. She was still holding her side. She had been declared lost. She had been torn apart by lies and by a system that wanted her to fail. But she had returned. The general walked up to her. He looked at the torn, Defiant captain. He raised his hand in a slow, respectful salute. Welcome back, Captain, he said. Eva Rostova, the mechanic's daughter, the outsider, the underdog, finally raised her own hand and returned the salute.